Welcome to Alchemist Camp, where we learn Elixir by building things. Last time we built out the beginnings of a database replacement for the CSV operated StatWatch module we made before, and we basically just made a table for profiles, and each profile will hold the data of user's web page URL, their YouTube profile, or actually their YouTube channel ID, and their Twitter handle. And then this program goes out and gets stats for them regularly. I've set it to every 6 hours, but it could be daily. That would actually probably make more sense. Or it could be super frequent, pretty much whatever we want. So the next step is to make it so the stat collection itself is done in the database instead of just writing out rows to a CSV file. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a new migration. So we'll open up the integrated terminal and we'll run mix ecto.gen.migration, and we'll call this one stats. Very good. And we should see a new one in here. We do. And now we need to put in the contents of the table. It's going to be the same stuff we saw in the app, but I'm going to name some things a little bit differently. Create table. Stats, and just to be super clear, we'll call the subscribers YouTube subs, and that will be an integer, and we'll call the number of videos YouTube videos, and that's also an integer. Then the views we'll call YouTube views. What was just called Twitter, we'll call this Twitter follows, or Twitter followers. And Alexa rank. We could, in theory, get different information from Twitter or Alexa in the future. That's why I'm making it more specific. And finally, profile ID. We'll connect this to the profile. So we'll say references, the profiles table, and on delete, we won't delete the stats. So on delete, nothing. Next, we want times, and we can just use the automatically generated timestamps instead of dealing with that on our own, like we were in the app previously. Oh, and actually now in Elixir, you have to do that if it's a function in this situation. All right, and the timestamps by default are going to be native, and I actually don't want that. I think there are just all kinds of horrible things that can happen if you don't use UTC times everywhere. So I could specify that as an option here. I actually could make it a module attribute, but instead of doing that, I'm going to set it globally from our config. And that's just a matter of adding a line to our repo config, migration timestamps, and type. This has to be an atom UTC date time. Now on any repos in our app, we will be using UTC timestamps by default, and we can avoid all of those horrible things. All right, we'll run that migration. Hey, Ecto's created a new table in the database. Now we need to add a schema so that Ecto knows what to do with it. So we will do so here, and it's just called stat.ex. StatWatch.stat, and use ecto.schema to bring in all the things from that DSL, all the macros, timestamps, options, and this is the same thing we specified in our config. The config handles it for the migrations. I don't believe that it does here. UTC date time. Right. And now we'll make the schema. And it's going to be pretty much the same as we just did. We also need YouTube videos and YouTube views and Twitter followers and Alexa rank. And then of course the timestamps. And finally, to link it up to our profile, we use belongs to. Table name, actually just profile, not the table name. StatWatch.profile. And save the file. Oh, whoops, looks like for some reason this is stats URL. This should have been just stats. Save that, okay. And we'll open the profile schema. Okay, so everything would work fine in terms of the database without this, because there's nothing in the database in the profiles table for stats. But if we want to be able to access all the stats associated with the profile, which is going to be pretty normal, then we need the has many stats in our profile so that Ecto knows it's connected. And with that done, we'll turn our attention to StatWatch, the main module. First thing we want to do, just for our own convenience, is alias a new module. So we'll go to, actually I haven't mentioned this shortcut yet. In VS Code, if you hit Control-G, it will open up this dialog, and then you can type in a line number and you go to that line number. Pretty convenient. We'll alias statwatch.stat, and then let's look at the run function. Run is getting all the profiles out of the repo. Then for each one, it's fetching the stats, and then it's passing that data to the save CSVs function. We're going to do almost the same thing up until the end. So we'll comment that out, and we'll fetch stats, pass it profile, and we'll pipe that into a new function that doesn't exist yet. That is save to DB, and we'll pass that the whole profile. Stats just needed to write the name of the profile into the CSV, but we're going to use this profile to save to the database. All right, next thing is the fetch stats function. It is returning a comma separated string, and we don't really want to do that unless we're going to be writing to a CSV. So we will cut this out and make it just return this list of stats. Then our save CSV function will add the functionality in there. So row, a new variable, equals row of stats joined on commas and turned into a string. Then everywhere row of stats was used after that point needs to change to just row. All right. Save CSVs should still work. And the next issue is each of these has to be an integer, but Alexa is not always returning a ranking, and we're writing unranked to the CSVs when it doesn't. And the other thing is this sweet XML module will return single quoted strings or character lists by default, and we don't want to do that. We want it to be a double quoted string if we do get a value, and if we don't, we've still got to deal with this unranked. Probably the easiest way to do that is just making a helper function. We'll call it forceInt. Let's open up IEX. Actually, on second thought, let's open up IEX with mix. We can always recompile later as we make changes. Right. Okay. I guess we gotta define at least a dummy function, then we can open up IEX. Save to DB, and it's gonna take stats and a profile. And it's gonna do absolutely nothing. All right, now we should be able to open up IEX. Schema StatWatch.stat does not exist. Profile StatWatch.stat does not exist. It sure should. StatWatch.profile StatWatch. This should be stat. Save that and recompile. And no errors. Good. Okay. So back to what I was talking about was, if you look at the stats, you can see the Alexa rank has to be an integer. And so we can't save unranked. And that's fine. What we can do is we can save an impossible value, like -1. And then in the view, we can interpret -1 to be unranked. So what we've got to do is we've got to make a safeguard so that unranked doesn't end up getting passed to the database. And let's look at this from IEX first. So there is a function called integer.parse. There's also string.toInt, but that won't work for us as well in this case. So if we do integer.parse and we pass it 5, it will return 5 and then some quotes. If we did that, then we'd get the non-integer part in the separate part of the tuple that gets returned. If integer.parse is given something that just can't be interpreted as an integer, then it will return an error. So what we want is we want to make sure that we get an integer and an empty string. So let's write that out. Force int, and it'll take an integer x, and we'll just match a case. Integer.parse of x. If we get a number and empty quotes, then that will be interpreted as the number. And if we get an error, or if we get something in the quotes besides the number, we get anything else, then we'll interpret that as -1. And -1 is just our catch-all for something that shouldn't be there. All right. Now that's done, we probably want to add that into our pipeline. So we'll do it like so. This is a map, so it's got to be enum.map force int, which takes 1 argument, and that happens before we save it to the database. Okay, that looks reasonable. All right, so for now, let's just have save to database output. Actually, let's just have it pass stats back out, and we'll recompile. And we'll also do a whole bunch of aliases. In fact, let's just grab those from the file. Paste that in here. All right, and then we also want to import StatWatch. Okay, good deal. I've got 4 profiles in here, and they're all -1. The first field is date time, and we're not actually using that in the database, and that's fine. So if we look at these, only one of the profiles has a -1 in the final position, which is the Alexa rank. The others have Alexa rankings. So this looks about like what we want. Let's set this up to pattern match. We don't really have a good way of just dealing with a list of numbers. So what we'll do is we'll throw away the first item, which is the date. And that's because we're automatically going to be getting timestamps when we save to the database. Then we'll get YouTube subscriptions, then we'll get videos, then we'll get views, then we'll get the number of Twitter followers. Maybe we'll just call that Twitter. Then we'll get Alexa rank, and that's the last one. So we've pattern matched in the function head, so now we can just access each of these things in a convenient way. And we'll create a stat struct. And YouTube subs. It's going to be subs. YouTube videos is videos. YouTube views is views. Twitter followers will get past Twitter. Then Alexa rank will get past what we captured as Alexa. Then finally we need a profile ID. And since we passed in a profile, we just do profile.id. I guess maybe we could have just passed in the ID, but it doesn't make a big difference for our case. And we'll insert that to the repo later. Let's just save it like this and make sure that the general idea works. So recompile. And oh dear, equals Alexa rank. Oh, just a typo. Still not 100% used to this keyboard, although it's getting much better. All right, now let's run. And that looks like pretty much exactly what we wanted. In fact, this is the format we could use to insert into the database in one go with repo.insertAll. And I kind of think that's the way to go. Let's confirm that that's the case. So stats equals the output of run. Stats repo dot insert all. The only problem is repo.insertAll won't take maps, or it won't take structs, I should say. So what we really want to do is just pass it bare maps. So let's change it to this, and that way it's enumerable and insertAll can go through the information in it. So we will recompile. And we will get some new stats from run. Just burning the YouTube API credits here. Now let's see if we can insert these. Let's see, what's wrong? Some Postgres errors. The timestamps. Okay. Yeah, insert all doesn't do the timestamps for you, unlike the normal insert. So we'll just use the date. Inserted at, and we might also need updated at. All right, recompile again. Fetch our stats again, and as soon as that's loaded, we'll insert them again. Value of -1. It does not match UTC date time. Right. That is starting to get annoying. Okay. We'll just copy this whole thing in here. Now it's like a Captain Ahab thing. We gotta get this working. Does not match type UTC datetime. That's pretty easy. Datetime.toString. So let's just say we'll just and it works. We have inserted all the things. All right. Is it worth it? Well, let's actually look at the repo here. Repo.all stat. Alexa rank. ID looks reasonable. Inserted at looks reasonable. Profile not loaded. It's got an ID. It's, yeah, all right. That was faster, so now let's just encode that into the logic. We want to get all the profiles, fetch the stats for them, and then pass that entire structure, that entire map of many stats for many profiles into a save function. So let's do it like this. First of all, we'll copy this and move one down here, just so that if we do want to put this old code somewhere else, it's easy to do so. The double comment, that seems like something an editor this good should be able to do properly. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll wrap this whole for in parentheses, and we'll pass that to a save all function. Problem is, this save to DB is now pretty poorly named, so we're going to rename it to, we're going to rename all of them to savable map. And does that look reasonable? To savable map. Takes all that, insert it out, update it at. Okay, yeah, that does look reasonable. And now we've got to make a save all function. And the save all is going to be extremely simple. And save all is going to be really simple. It's going to basically just be what we just put into IEX. So let's have a look at that. It's repo.insert all and stat and stats. So repo.insert all, and we still need the stat module, and pass it our savable map. And that should do it, unless we're going to worry about error handling, which we're not. Okay, let's give it a try. Do is missing an end. Line 12. Do end. Oh, we didn't end the for. Right, so we don't even need to wrap it in parentheses. Says it's okay. Let's see if it's okay. Looks like that did what it was supposed to. Let's check repo.all of stat. And ID is up to 13. that looks like good news. You know, it's actually a little bit of a pain to load stats for a profile, so let's make a new function and fix that. And we'll call it load profile. We'll just take the name, because I pretty much, I'm not going to memorize the IDs of the profiles. I pretty much always want to get them by name. So repo get by profile, and specifically look it up by its name. And repo.preload stats. That should do it. Let's recompile, re-import so we get the new function. Load profile alchemist. Beautiful. Okay, so that doesn't handle how it's going to be displayed to the user. I mean, when it's a CSV, we kind of circumvented the whole question by just letting them download it. And then in the Alchemist Camp website, we've got a simple template that will turn the CSV into a table, and then you can look at the table. That's kind of a separate question though, because StatWatch is a standalone module. It goes out, it gets stats, and it saves them. Whether if it's saving them in a CSV or if it's saving them in a database isn't the most important thing in terms of how it interfaces with the outside world. It's really just responsible for the data. The presentation really should depend entirely on what it's interfacing with. If it's a logging app, then it's probably just going to put the stats to I/O, but it might be a fancy web app where it's sending them to the front end that's using D3 or some kind of charting library to display them. So it's really outside the scope of this, and we're going to call this a win. StatWatch is upgraded. It works with databases now. Deployment will be another task for another day, and I might actually build this out a bit more and make it a bit easier for other people to log their stats, because it seems like if I wanted to do it, I bet a lot of other people do too. There may already be a super easy way to do it, just I didn't consider Googling it and immediately wrote my own thing like far too many developers tend to do. But that's all right. It was fun. So the challenge for this time is pretty bite-sized. The challenge is make a module that flattens lists. And this is already built into standard library. Don't use that, obviously. Basically, your input is going to be something like, let me bump up the font size even more. There we go. Your input is going to be something like a list with some elements in it, and then inside of that, maybe you'll have a deeply nested list with more stuff in it, and so on. And this will just get turned into, this is not Elixir syntax, will get turned into a flat list with all the same items. Something like that. Did I get it right? 1, 2, 5, 3, 8, 9, 4. Yeah. Make a function that takes a list with any crazy amount of nesting in it and flattens it out into one single list that contains elements that are not lists. Oh, and check out the survey I linked to in last video. I am listening very carefully to what all of you viewers are asking for, and it does influence the content of future lessons. Till next time, code on.